Hello, welcome to a special midweek edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber, and this is the next in our Ranunculus series. I'm filming after I've come home from work because I'd like to keep going on my Ranunculus. What I'd like to do today, I'm not done with the torso of my Ranunculus. Let's see if I can hold it up. I'm not done. I'd like it to be longer than that. I have this much of my color changing yarn left, but I'd like to, here's my plan, is to do the sleeves and see what yarn I have left once I do the sleeves and use the leftover of these guys, or at least one of them maybe, to make the bottom of this a little bit longer without having to use another skein of this lovely color changing yarn. I don't want to have too many leftovers. And that way I figure I can get y'all going to where you are. Some of y'all who are doing our knit along, Ranunculus knit along, have already finished yours. That's great. But if you're doing the long sleeves, which really means anything longer than just instantly binding off the sleeves at sleeve separation, then you may find helpful a video of getting how to start these sleeves once you finish the torso, once you move on to the section 7. Now, the torso and the sleeves, you get to pick how long you want them to be. She says do it for so many inches or to the length you want. So the way she's got the sleeves designed, there is a length. You can choose to have a diagonal cuff line or a straight cuff line, and that might depend on if you're doing like 3/4 inch sleeves. You might like the diagonal cuff line. I think for this one, I'm planning on doing full length sleeves because it's a little bit of a heavier yarn. So we'll see, but today's is just about section 7, which is getting you started on the sleeves. You could decide to get it off the stitch holders, and like this guy has really short sleeves. You could decide to get it off the stitch holders and just do a little bit of ribbing. You can change this to do what you want. You could decide to do the I-cord bind off not long after you get it off the stitch holder. This is just about getting it off the stitch holder and onto needles. And it talks about in here, again, remember that this is not to replace the pattern. This is to be used in conjunction with the pattern. Please buy Midori's pattern on Ravelry. And then this is to assist you in getting through the pattern. So I'm not going to be talking about stitch numbers necessarily, because at this point everyone's got different sizes for their pattern, for the size they're making, I should say. But it says here with magic loop method or gauge needle double point needles. You can decide what you want to do. Here's what I recommend, or I have a recommendation, a couple. I would say I have videos that I will try to get into the playlist on this channel for the Ranunculus. I have videos straight up on magic loop and on using double points for what I call small circumference knitting. And another method that you can use, all three of these can be used interchangeably. Small circumference knitting is when you have a circle area that may be smaller than your smallest circular needle. This is my 16 inch that I started with. If you started with a 16 inch, for a lot of these sizes, this could be long enough, and you can go ahead and do your whole sleeve on these. If you're tapering down, you may need something smaller. I'm going to show you today what happens if it fits on the 16 inch, which is what I'm hoping is going to happen with mine. Or another method is 2 circulars. She doesn't mention it in her pattern, but it is one that I prefer. And I'm not going to walk you through the whole thing. I have a separate video on that, but I'll get you set up for it, and I might talk about the basics of it. I also have one about when you're starting sleeves, I think, getting from the double points onto sleeves. If you would like to do 2 at a time sleeves, which is an option, I have made another video on that. That's its own separate video. I didn't do it with this pattern. I did it with another sweater I'm making. But that is an option. If you want your sleeves to come out exactly the same length, you can set up both sleeves at the same time on 2 circulars. You'll need something longer than the 2 I've recommended you start with. I've got like a 40 inch here, and I've got a 16 inch. And if I want to do one sleeve at a time, These will be enough for a sleeve on 2 circulars as a method of small circumference knitting. If you want to do both sleeves at the same time, you need 2 longer needles, like a 40-inch and a 32 to do that. That's not this video, but I have one on that. I will see if I can link it in the description if I remember. When I do these videos when I come home from work, I'm a little tired, so we'll see what I remember, but you can put a comment on and remind me. So let's get to it, and then we'll talk on the other side about, if you're enjoying these videos, ways that you can support Sun Dragon and what we're doing. Let's definitely get to it now before the wind blows my door shut. So as I mentioned in the introduction, I have not finished my torso. Here's the top. Here's my torso. I have left it. I put it on a barber cord to free up one of my needles. So I'm going to come over here. This is an example of, you don't have to do it in order if you don't want to, as long as you have a way to hold your live stitches so they don't unravel. So here is my sleeve that I put on a stitch holder on my barber cord. I'm using color changing yarn, so I've rolled off the brightest section in here so I can hopefully try to match my sleeve and look at like the color changing just magically kept going. So I've balled off this. I have this to keep in case I want to use it as trim somewhere or something funky. I will decide that later. So I have the end of my yarn ready. And I have 2 circulars in case I want to do that. What I want to try first, if you have a 16-inch, if you started on a 16-inch, that could be enough for all these stitches. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to slide these stitches off of the barber cord onto my flexible 16-inch needle. Now, depending on the size that you have selected to make, you may or may not have, the smallest 2 sizes have only 41 stitches. I'm doing one that has, I think mine's got 45. It's not a big difference. Depending on the fiber you choose, things like that, the 16-inch may or may not work. If you started on a longer circular needle than this, you may need to try the double point option, or you may want to try the 2 circular or magic loop, anything you want. So I'm going to see if all of these will fit on one circular. If you have a longer circular, this may or may not work. You might have to divide these stitches in half. But I've got the end on my barber cord. These are just the funkiest, coolest invention. Whoever, the JoJo who came up with these. And I've scrunched them up, and I'm going to slide them off my stitch holder. This could be waste yarn for you, and you can just very carefully do this. There's my cat being crazy. So I can get, whoop, and I just managed to get this on here before my barber cord pulled off because I pulled really hard. So I've got all 45 on my circular needle like this. And I think that the stitches that we cast on here are now we're going to pick up stitches across this. And I think I can get it all on this one circular. If you didn't want to do it, if you wanted to do 2 circulars or a magic loop, I would divide this in half and maybe separate them before I got going. If you feel comfortable having this all on one, awesome. If your circular is longer, sorry, my cat is flipping out over there. One of the ways you can navigate this right now is divide these stitches roughly in half. It's not going to be perfect because they're an odd number. But for mine, it's going to be about 22 or so. So 2, 4, 6, 22 or 23. This is the center of these stitches. On a longer cable than what I have, I just bent it and pulled. I can show you that one more time. bend it right there and pull this out. So I love the chow goose. They're really firm for something like this. You can divide it in half, and then this cast on down here, she wants you to begin at the center of the underarm and pick up stitches going out, and then knit around and pick up stitches coming back in. I'm going to try this on the circular needle that I have here without dividing up the stitches to see if I can get around. If you have double points, again, divide this by 3, and then these extra stitches are going to go on a couple of your double points. What I like to do, I'll show you in a second, is if we're splitting this up for 2 circulars, one circular is going to start in the middle here and go up to the halfway point. And one circular is going to start up at the halfway point and come down to the center. But let's try, let's say you can fit them all comfortably on your 16-inch needle like this and get these guys picked up. That's fantastic. Let's see if we can do it. If you had a longer circular right now, what I would recommend is dividing in half up here, the magic loop method. So we can always redistribute onto 2 circulars. Again, if you want to do them both at the same time, please watch my setting up for 2 at a time on 2 circular needles video. But I'm going to leave this not pulled for the moment. The instructions say, with main needles beginning at the center of the underarm, you're going to pick up the number of stitches that she tells you to. You're going to knit the sleeve, the stitches that are on your needle right now, and then come over here and pick up the others. So how do we start this? Okay. I would see if you can eyeball roughly the stitches across here. There's going to be a cast on edge that she's made that's nice and firm. When I come in and look at this, I can see, you either see V's going up or going down. And when I come over here, I see V's pointing up, like between my 2 thumbs, going all the way up like this. There's a little bit of a gap right here, and there's a full stitch of 2 strands over here. And then we start going across this middle section from this, where my thumb is right here. So if I can see it about over here, I'm going to see how many V's I see pointing up. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if I read through all of the instructions before I do this round, she wants me to start at the center, pick up 4 stitches, go around and pick up 4 more. So across this, from the center, there's 4, and over here, there's 4. Like total, we'll be picking up 8 stitches across this section right here. And I just counted 8 little V's. That's perfect. So if I start at if I'm trying to find the middle and I'm not sure, if I start right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So this right here, I'll point at it with another needle so it's easier to see. This guy right here, this spot, this middle of a V pointing up, is where I want to start picking up stitches, right in there. I'm going to put my thumb just to the right of it, and I'm going to move these stitches up so I can get at it. If I move these stitches down, eventually we're going to connect all this. If I move these stitches down, it's really hard for me to get in there. So I'm going to slide my stitches up on this needle. The pick up stitches, I treat as a pick up and knit. So I'm going to pick up the area I want to knit. I have videos on picking up stitches, by the way, separate from this, but within this context, I'm going to pick them up with my left needle, and then I'm going to knit them with my right, which also means I want to get this side. The stitches need to be up on my needles to make this work, so I'm not pulling too hard. But I want to pick up with this needle, and I find I'm going to aim for the center of this V right here. That's here's where my thumb is the middle. So just to the left of it is where I'm going to start. So I'm going to take my left needle and put it in the middle. If we can get under 2 strands, this is great, way up top. But sometimes going through the middle of this V pointing up right there, even if it's under a lot, can help it be more sturdy and can help it feel more balanced. So I'm going to put my left needle in, and all this crazy gobbledygook. I'm going to try to get my right needle, treat it like a single loop. I'm going to get my right needle under there, pushing it through and under just like a regular knitting. And then I'm going to take my scrap yarn. I know I let go of this. This is something you might want to do first. Take the yarn that you're going to be knitting with, leave a tail so we can sew up and hide holes and ends later. And then I like to fool my brain into thinking it's attached. And I pinch it to the back with the hand that's not holding tension, which for me is my left hand. So I can pretend it's attached and go ahead and knit. So wrap around or pick, pull back under, and then just take your left needle out. Now this may be big and loose. We can tighten him up in just a second. But this is my first stitch right here. He was in the center of this row, this column of V's coming up. So if you need to, you can put your thumb on the other side of this. We want to move over to the center of the next row of V's pointing up. So it's almost like moving over 2 strands of yarn right there. So 1, 2. This center right in there, 1, 2, right there is where we want to stick our needle next, right in the center. If you want to get up higher, great. I'm okay with having a lot of craziness over this because it'll be in the under seam. I'm okay with that. So I'm putting it right in the center of this V pointing up. I'm going to put it right there and stick it straight through to the back. And then again, I got to get my stitches up close here. I want to get my right needle underneath like I'm going to knit it. I'm going to knit this huge gobbledygook. Wrap around and pull back under. It might take you several tries. That's okay. So that's my second one. My first one, if he's all loose, if I find the tail, which might feel crissy-crossy, we can get it all entangled later. We can snug up this second one now. All of these, if they're loose, this tail has some control over them for the moment. So these are 2 of my 4. So if it came out of the middle of this column, we want to go to the middle of the next column, or we want to count over 2 strands. 1, 2. Sorry, my cat is blocking my light. He is annoyed that I'm filming at an irregular time. So here is the middle of the next row of V's pointing up. I'm going to stick him under. Again, I don't care if there's a big, huge seam here because it's my underarm. No one's going to see it. It's going to be turned to the inside. I put it in the middle, and I'm going to stick my right needle in and knit it and pull that yarn over, knit back through. Okay, then. And just take my left needle out again. I've got 3. If you can't see these spots equally distributed, just start as close as you think the center is and try to equally space them. Again, this is your armpit, your underarm. It shouldn't show as much. You have ways to hide this later. So keep this up. Here's my last one of, let's see. Oh, see, I almost went to the wrong spot. Here is the V's pointing up. There's a hole right next to it, but I want to skip 2 strands and I want to go over here. So I want to go, if I can get higher, that's great. But if I need to get down in here, that's okay too. Put my left needle in, get my right needle in to knit. This might take some wiggling and you might have to check it and see and stretch it. Let's wrap around and duck under. I have 4 now. And if I need to, I'm going to tug a little and tighten up. Make sure this whole time, because guess what I just did? At least this one I just did with my tail. I need to back up. My 4th one, the tail crossed over. So I'm going to do him again. That's a good thing to check to make sure. I'm going to stick my left needle back in again. And here's my right needle under to knit it. And I got to make sure I'm not knitting with my tail because that ends in sadness. Okay, here's my 4. There's a little hole here. He might stay there. We might have to fix him later. That's the 4 I was supposed to pick up. Now I need to knit around to the other side because there's still a gap over here. So I'm going to knit all the way around and I'll meet you over there and we'll talk about what happens over there. So knit the right number of stitches that she tells you to knit, which should be all the stitches that were on your sleeve holder, and I'll meet you over there. Okay, I am coming to the end of my stitches that were on the holder, my live stitches. Some of these are right after an increase, so they're a little tight. Go ahead and knit them all. And extra space here, again, I need to squish these stitches up and around. If they're too stretched out on your 16-inch or the needle you have, I'll go over in a second a different option for this. But if you can do this all on one needle, fantastic. If not, I will show you how to set up to do this with 2 needles. But if we can get this pickup done, it's kind of great. So here's my first one. When she says there's a certain number you have to pick up, for me it's 4 that we want to cross this gap. So I want to plan ahead to make sure this goes well. So I have a column that goes up here. So I want to double check this. And this actually, let's see. Yeah, here's my column going up that this stitch came out of. He's a little twisted or pulled over. If I put my thumb on the right side of that column of V's going up, here's my next one. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4. I need to pick up 4. So this is my 4th, and I'm going to head into the center. So I'm going to keep an eye on this one, and if I can, I'm even going to get my needle in there. Remember, in the middle of the V going up. If you can get higher to the top, great, but I don't think I can. So all this I'm going to skip because it's actually part of, if we pull the needles together, that this big gappy spot can be mostly covered up. So I didn't want to start way over here and then go too far, like have the stitches too stretched out. So I've put in that what's 4 stitches away, and I'm going to trust that this is going to kind of suck up. So my left needle is in, I'm going to get my right needle in, and if it doesn't work, I got to slide these stitches closer. I've got him in as cleanly as I can. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a loop and drop out my left needle. Now, see, if I squish it, if I pull, I still see a hole there, but if I squish these guys together, that is going to be fairly good right there. So this was in the middle of this upward V column. I can move my thumb over to meet this guy, and then I can find my next 2 strands, making V's. The center of that is where I want to stick my left needle, and then put in my right one so I can knit it. I just picked up right here. If I put my thumbnail where this guy was on the side there, I can find my next 2 stitches, my 2 strands that make V's running up. I'm going to put my left needle in. My right needle is going to have to wiggle through all this hot mess to try to knit it. It sometimes takes a little working. Wrap around and pull up. That's 3. That's right here. Here's my 4th. It might feel like there's a really big space. Just try to aim for the middle between all this. My left needle goes in. My right needle. Ooh, it's hard to get him in there. If we need to wiggle to pull stuff apart, and honestly, I might have split some yarn there. I'm going to go a little deeper with my left needle and then get my right in. This is kind of an art form and not a science, so you might have to wiggle and try. But see, now I've got 4 over here and 4 over here. This is my new end of round right there. We're going to place a marker right here in the middle so I can start knitting my round. Now, another option we can have, if this feels too tight for you and you're not comfortable with all of it on a 16-inch, or if you don't have a 16-inch, what we could have done in the very beginning, even before we pick these up, if you can get these up and all and then redistribute, that's great. But even before we pick these up, we could put half of our stitches onto a separate circular, and I've got another one here, so I can show you what that would look like. if I have for the total number of stitches I'm supposed to have, it's gonna be and it's gonna be about 25-ish, give or take. It doesn't need to be evenly divided, just mostly even. And this stitch marker that's right here, if we evenly divide where the end of round is where the stitch marker should be, he's not going to stay on. The same thing with double points. He's not going to stay on. You need to find your own way of marking the beginning of round. I'm going to slide him off for a second. And I'm going to, if we're slipping stitches to a new needle, I recommend doing it purlwise, where you're just sticking your needle in straight and sliding over. Whoop. I did about 25, but see, this is what it will look like. If it's on two circulars, you'll have half of the stitches on one circular and half on another. And these I can tell apart because one's really long and one's really short. If you wanted to place an end of round marker, there's different ways to do this right now. If you decide to do two circulars or magic loop or even double points, if the division between two needles is where your sleeve starts, you just need to keep track of, especially with two circulars or magic loop, you're going to have bottom and top, and you need to keep track of that. And that could be because the yarn end is hanging out there, or it could be that you keep looking at your sweater and saying, this is the bottom of the sleeve and this is my shoulder. Or one of the tricks, if you need a way to keep track, is as you start to knit your first row, because here's the deal with two circulars. One of the circulars is just a stitch holder. My small one, I'm going to ignore both ends of. I'm going to leave it just hanging there. I want to keep knitting in a circle. Like I said, I have videos that are instructive only on this technique, and I think they're much more helpful than jamming too much into one video. So I've gotten my needle up. I'm going to find the other end of the same needle and bring it around, and I'm going to start knitting it. If this is fascinating, watch those videos. And what I'm going to do if I can't keep track of which needle is which, I'm going to knit my first stitch and maybe snug it up so there's no gap there. And I'm going to put my stitch marker one stitch inside the beginning of this round. Because if it was right where the needle split, it would fall off. But what it does is as I knit across just this row, and I should say just this half of this round, let's take a look when I'm done at what this looks like. When I get to the end of this side, I am just going to put my stitches in the middle of this needle. And in a second, I'll pivot and show you what it looks like to knit the other side. Again, this is the two circular method. This little guy here shows me that when I come to him, he's one stitch inside this side. But if he is close to the tip of that needle, I'm starting a new round. That's how I keep track. Right now, the yarn's up here, which means if we're knitting in a circle, we need to be knitting up here. So I'm going to pivot the entire piece that I'm knitting. I'm going to turn it around so that the other needle, this one's the short one for my work, is facing me. Because where I ended, I need to keep going in a circle. I need to come right here. Again, the two circular video I have is what might help clarify this. I'm going to get it all up on my needle. I'm going to find the other end of the same needle. It might feel really weird at first. And I'm going to come over here and knit. The really long one is just holding stitches. It's just holding the other end of stitches. I'm going to knit the first one. I'm going to snug it up so there's not a gap there. And I'm going to start knitting across this row. this can be helpful if you're planning on tapering your sleeves in any way. I have a video on sleeve shaping in general because she just wants you to knit straight. She would like these to be big, loose, open sleeves. And she says to maybe do it 7 inches. Do it, I mean, that's going to be like a half sleeve. You're going to go as long or as short as you want. I'm still deciding how long or short I want mine to be. If you're going to follow her instructions and not do any tapering of your sleeve and just letting them be big and loose, then you might be able to do all of this on just your 16-inch, and you might not need 2 circulars like this. But if you're going to taper them and make them smaller, if you take stitches out, see, I just finished the second side here. If you make this circumference smaller to taper to your sleeve because you like the look of that, and that's really a personal decision that she's not going to instruct you on, and I may not really have good instructions for, then you may need to have your stitches set up like this on 2 circulars or a magic loop or double point needles to allow for the circumference of your sleeve to get smaller and not have your stitches stretched out because they're on your 16-inch. I am probably going to continue with this sleeve on the 16-inch. They do make smaller circumference needles. They do make, I'm going to get this set up here so I can slide them all back onto my 16-inch. They do make 12-inch circulars. But they usually don't make them in size 10s. So you have to figure out another method of small circumference knitting. I think for a lot of these sizes, as long as your gauge isn't super tight, you can do this all on 16-inch. And if I'm going to do that, as I work these back up here, the gap where you switch needles with 2 circulars can, if it goes well, will be a little tight. It's better than too loose and gappy. So I'm just sliding these back over. And I'm going to take, this guy was just marking a side, so I'm going to take him off. I'm going to go to the very center here. I don't have my longer circular on. They're all on 1 circular. I'm going to put my stitch marker in the correct place because I don't need to tell side from side. I'm going to try to find, there it is. No one ever has yarn get tangled on them, right? Said no knitter ever. So now I've got the whole thing because it can fit on my circular. I'm going to keep the stitch marker in the correct place and just start knitting in a circle. And now I get to experiment and see how long I can get this sleeve to be. She recommends when you get the sleeve to the right length, count how many rows since this picking up of stitches in here. And I've found this has happened on all my sleeves where I start and then I come back over. There's a little bar right here. All the rest of my pickups look really, really even and good, except for this very first one I picked up. And that's happened a lot lately. And I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm okay with that right here because it is marking my stitch count. I can say I've done 2 rows. I'm counting the pickup as a row, but that can help me count how many rows my sleeve is so that they come out identical. So thanks for joining us tonight for getting set up for your long sleeves. I have one of my sleeves, and this part that looks like a big hole, it's because I joined new yarn there. So I ran out of my first skein of yarn right in there. So try to ignore that big gappy holes I show you. I have one sleeve on my needles. I have one sleeve that is still on stitch holders. But I think because it seems to fit on my 16-inch, that is the way that I am going to do it. If you have longer needles than a 16-inch, I have videos on 2 circulars, I have videos on magic loop, and I have videos on double point needles for small circumference knitting. I will try to put them all in the description of this video and on the playlist for the ranunculus. The playlist for the ranunculus is getting pretty long because almost every single skill that I have a video on could be helpful in some way. You just get to pick. So thank you for joining us. If you have enjoyed these videos, please consider at least subscribing to this channel if you haven't already, giving it a thumbs up, a good comment. That's free ways you can help my channel. You can go to the Sun Dragon KAL over on Facebook. I'll try to put that in the description as well if you want to see what other people are making. And other people may be able to help you more because there's one of me and lots of you, and I love that, but I can't answer everybody's questions. Other ways, if you would like to support the work that's going into these videos, you can become a member here on YouTube. There are different small levels of subscription fees. You can become a patron over on patreon.com/sundragon. You can make a donation to the shop, to Sundragon Art and Fiber. You could buy yarn from us. We don't ship overseas right now, so we only ship within the continental US. We might be able to get to Hawaii. If it's Puerto Rico, call us because it counts, but our online shop does weird things. Anyway, it's really wonderful to connect to everybody and to see what you're making. Feel free to also, you could email us photos if you're liking how, if you want to show how your ranunculus is going. Have fun, enjoy, and may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. Bye-bye now.